I knew the moment I saw the woman marching across my lawn with that furious stiletto-heeled stride that this neighborhood was going to be a problem. It was the third week after I'd moved into Copper Oaks, an aggressively suburban HOA where appearances were more important than sanity, and I was still in that blissful honeymoon stage where you think the biggest issue you'll face is figuring out which recycling bin is for glass. Then she showed up. Beige yoga pants, diamond-encrusted sunglasses, a haircut engineered in a lab to demonstrate dominance. I didn't know her name yet, but the universe whispered it into my ear like an ancient prophecy. Karen. I had just plugged in my Tesla to the brand new Level 2 charger I installed on the side of my house. I was actually proud of the setup. Clean install, conduit hidden, a perfectly logical upgrade for someone who commutes as much as I do. But this woman wasn't coming toward me to compliment my energy efficiency. Her face looked like she'd spent the morning gargling Sour Patch Kids and resentment. Without even introducing herself, she pointed at my charger like it had personally insulted her. "So that's the first problem," she said, arms folded tightly enough to cut off circulation. I blinked at her. "Excuse me?" She scoffed like someone who'd been preparing that moment for weeks. The HOA rules clearly state that all exterior structures and utilities must be approved before installation. Aaron didn't approve this. I responded the only logical way. "Who's Aaron?" Her mouth dropped open as if I'd just asked who the president was or what oxygen does. "Our HOA president," she snapped. "And I am the compliance chair." She said it the way some people say surgeon or Nobel Prize winner. I took a calm breath because I'm a rational adult and because I'd read enough Reddit stories to know that matching Karen energy is how you lose. "Well, the charger is entirely on my property, and I checked. This type of installation doesn't require HOA approval." She squinted at the charger, then at my driveway, then at me. "It faces the street," she said. "That makes it community visible, which means it belongs to the community." I don't know if she expected me to hand her the cable right there, but I actually laughed. She didn't appreciate that. "A Tesla charger is not a communal feature," I explained. She waved a manicured hand like she was swatting away a mosquito. "Our neighborhood has shared values. We don't hog resources. You can't claim something like this for yourself." I scratched my head, trying to figure out how electricity flowing through wiring connected to my personal meter could be construed as a shared resource. Before I could respond, she delivered the real punchline. "My husband drives a Mercedes EQS," she said triumphantly. "Your charger is compatible. He will be using it too, starting today." I stared at her, waiting for the part where she admitted she was joking, or punking me, or filming a comedy sketch for TikTok. Instead, she stepped even closer as if trying to physically transfer authority through proximity. I could feel the heat of her entitlement radiating off her like solar panels in July. I chose to remain friendly because I genuinely believed this was just a misunderstanding between adults. "Not happening," I said casually. "It's my charger. It's locked to my account. Your husband is welcome to get his own." Her eyes widened as if I'd just slapped her with a charging cable. "You selfish child," she hissed. "We don't treat neighbors like this." "I treat neighbors kindly," I replied. "Thieves? Not so much." She gasped dramatically and stormed away while tapping violently on her phone. I figured that would be the end of it. A weird encounter with an overzealous HOA busybody. But later that evening, while I sat inside finishing a work call, I heard voices outside. I stepped onto the porch and found a man in golf attire, two teens recording everything like unpaid interns, and Karen herself, hands on hips, glaring at my charger. Her husband was trying to yank the charging cable off its holster. I shouted, and the teens jumped back, but the man smirked. "Oh, relax, neighbor. We're just borrowing it." That's when I reached for my phone. The teenagers perked up like this was premium entertainment. I told them to step off my property before I called the police. Karen laughed like I was a 5-year-old threatening to call Santa. "You'll call the police because we're charging an electric vehicle? You're insane. My car isn't even plugged in. Your husband is literally breaking something attached to my house, I said. That's vandalism. The husband finally stepped back, saying the charger wasn't functioning. I reminded him it was set to lock automatically after each session. I'm not paying for your electricity. He shrugged. Then unlock it. Now the teens were bored. The husband was annoyed. But Karen, her grin sharpened. Consider this your first and final warning, she said. If you refuse to allow this community to use a community asset, you will regret it. She marched off, husband and board camera crew in tow. That night a letter was shoved under my door. An official compliance notice. Unauthorized electrical device visible from street. Remove or relocate immediately. Fine. $250 per day starting tomorrow. I stared at the paper, my jaw tightening. I had the permit from the city. I had the receipt. I had the logic of every molecule in existence on my side. But arguing logic with an HOA zealot is like trying to negotiate with a raccoon who wants your sandwich because it saw it first. The next morning, I attended the HOA meeting she clearly expected me to skip. She was shocked when I showed up armed with documentation and common sense. Aaron, the HOA president, looked exhausted just listening to her. He's right, Karen. He doesn't need approval. It's his charger. There's no rule against it. Karen twitched. But it faces the street. And, Aaron said, so does your inflatable holiday snowman, but we let that slide. Karen looked like she was about to rupture. She glared at me and hissed through clenched teeth. This isn't over. I smiled politely. Unfortunately for me, she meant it. She filed noise complaints about the charger that made no sound. She accused me of running an illegal charging business. She convinced her husband to park blocking my driveway to access the charger more conveniently. The police showed up twice because she lied that I had electrified the sidewalk. The final straw came one evening when I returned from the store and found her husband's Mercedes plugged into my charger. The teens had helped bypass the lock by holding the cable just right. My electricity bill was now a community service. I unplugged it. He shouted. Karen came sprinting like I'd cancelled her spa membership. You don't own electricity, she shrieked. I calmly informed her that now she'd crossed a line, because she had stolen utilities and trespassed on private property. She grinned like she'd prepared this line for days. Prove it. Something snapped inside me. Not anger. Strategy. If they wanted electricity so badly, I was going to give them the most shocking education of their lives. And unlike them, I'd do everything by the book. Because while revenge tastes best served cold, sometimes it's also wired at 240 volt. I decided then, I'd electrify her attitude without breaking a single rule. I kept a spreadsheet. Names, dates, wording, photos of the charger, the city permit, the electrician's invoice, little rows of sanity in a messy situation. Logging things felt tactical. It felt like assembling my case while pretending this was boring. Paperwork is an underrated weapon against entitlement. After the ledger came leverage. My charger's smart features allowed guest access and billing. I configured guest passes that required account verification, a short time window, and a per kWh fee that would be transparently invoiced. The goal wasn't to profit. It was to make clear there are costs and consent involved in using private utilities. I also started whispering to neighbors in public places, which is how quiet coalitions form. At the farmer's market, I mentioned the permit in passing. Mrs. Ramos, who waters the communal entryway, remembered Karen's 6-year feud about a mailbox. Mr. Patel recalled the last time Karen tried to get someone fined for a blue trash can. Small acknowledgments turned into sworn statements. 3 neighbors signed brief attestations about past false complaints and about noticing the teens fiddling with my cable, and those signatures turned gossip into corroboration. Aaron called an emergency review. Karen arrived in a blazer that looked like it could file complaints on its own. She slapped down a binder full of highlighted accusations and recited a doctrine about communal ownership that had been practiced in the mirror. Her claim was simple. Visibility equals community asset. The board listened with mixed expressions. When it was my turn, I spoke plainly about code and property law. I opened my phone and showed the smart account settings. I offered a compromise: guest access by approved neighbors under board oversight. The compromise appealed to the board because it gave them control and structure. The board voted in my favor, and for a moment the victory tasted like lemonade. Karen did not accept public rebuke gracefully. She posted a long message in the community forum accusing me of profiteering. Her husband uploaded edited clips of teenagers playing with the cable and framed it as sabotage. He filed an obscure complaint with the county inspector about a permit technicality. The inspector took photos and asked for clarifications, which I provided. Bureaucracy moves slowly, but it moves with authority when properly evidenced. I activated the guest pass feature and set it to deny service to any unverified attempt and to send a neutral, automatically generated email to the account holder when someone tried to bypass the lock. The message read, "Attempted use of private charging station recorded. Please contact the owner for permission. Evidence has been logged. Please refrain from further attempts." That email landed in the husband's inbox, and the teens filmed it like it was the season finale of a show. The husband fumed and Karen shrieked about surveillance, privacy, and persecution, but technology in neutral tones is harder to dramatize. The tactics shifted toward me personally. Notes appeared on my windshield. "Please be considerate, then. This is a warning," and finally a manicured photograph of the curb with the charger circled in red. She hosted neighborhood concerns meetings where grievances were rehearsed. A burner account began circulating edited images implying my charger was hazardous. I traced the email headers as far as I could. The senders were anonymous, but the tone suggested desperation, not power. The campaign's energy moved from performative to vindictive, and that pivot is what makes people dangerous. Aaron ordered mediation. At the mediation table, Karen's performance moved between performative hurt and righteous indignation. The mediator reviewed the footage and the filings and asked practical questions. The facts were stubborn in the way facts always are. Permits matched codes, footage showed tampering, and 3 neighbors corroborated the pattern of false complaints. The mediator recommended a cease to harassment and affirmed my right to the charger under reasonable conditions. The board agreed. That felt like a formal gate closing on the theatric. The win was partial and fragile. Karen sulked publicly for a week, then pivoted to passive aggression. Her followers thinned. The county closed the permit snag. The neighborhood returned to ordinary preoccupations: lawn care, school carpools, the small gossip that actually binds people. I slept easier. Then Karen's husband texted, "We need to talk." He suggested coffee. I accepted because I prefer public places with witnesses and because sometimes human beings contain more than their worst performances. At the coffee shop he was oddly candid. He complained about the attention, said his wife hadn't realized how far the campaign would go, and offered a tentative truce. Structured access with board oversight, limited time slots, and clarity on fees. I accepted the terms in writing and proposed we present the agreement to the board. 2 neighbors had already expressed relief at a practical solution. It felt ordinary enough to be believable until 2 nights later when the camera recorded a shadow approaching the charger pad and the sound of someone fiddling with the lock. That was the escalation I had feared. Covert tampering rather than performative complaint. I took the footage to Aaron and to the county contact with a calm email that contained attachments and timestamp. Aaron called for increased patrols, and the county sent an electrician to inspect for tampering. The electrician found scratch marks and a makeshift pry point. Whoever had tried to bypass the lock had been careful but clumsy, leaving forensic traces like a confession written in scratches. The investigation moved outward from me into the neighborhood orbited by Karen's campaign. Subpoenas were quiet and procedural, not cinematic. The detective was polite but persistent. The teens who had filmed earlier were questioned. Their phones revealed edits and commentary that matched the online posts that had inflamed the community. The husband's account showed a blurry GPS ping near the charger on the night of the tampering. I felt the peculiar, weary satisfaction of documentation doing what indignation could not, turning rumor into evidence and theatrics into paperwork. By the time the board convened again, the mood had shifted. People who had watched the saga unfold in chat groups now preferred the ordinary rhythms of life. Aaron read the detective's preliminary notes and the county electrician's report. The board issued a formal reprimand to Karen for harassment and to her husband for attempted tampering. The legal tone of the reprimand carried weight because it was attached to municipal findings. Karen attempted one last theatrically righteous post about community ethics, and then her followers dwindled to a handful of loyal outriders. When the dust settled, I didn't throw a party or post a manifesto. I updated my spreadsheet and archived the case. I left the charger settings as they were, accessible to registered neighbors under board oversight, with clear fees and timestamps, and with a camera that recorded attempts. I slept with less worry. I wanted peace and to be left alone. For a few stress-free weeks, my charger hummed quietly each night while my car refueled like any normal adult responsibility. I walked my dog, waved to decent neighbors, enjoyed coffee without mentally rehearsing legal code. Even Karen retreated into a low simmer, limiting herself to the occasional dirty look that felt almost nostalgic compared to her earlier volcanic eruptions. But peace in a neighborhood like this is never permanent. The first sign was the smell, faint but wrong, like burning plastic mixed with arrogance. I stepped outside to find a smoldering spot near the conduit where my charger met the exterior wall. The scorch marks were too intentional for accident and too incompetent for success. The electrician later confirmed someone had attempted to short the lock mechanisms with a crude homemade tool. It failed just enough to leave damage and evidence. I wasn't angry. I was practical. Evidence, photos, time-stamped recordings, statements submitted. Aaron looked tired when he read my message, like he'd aged 10 HOA years in the span of one dispute. He dispatched another notice to Karen's household, a polite but pointed demand for compliance and distance. She faxed back 3 pages accusing me of staging vandalism to frame her. When her fax machine ran out of toner, she switched to long-winded emails reminding everyone that I had brought electric chaos into a peaceful community. She clung to the narrative that she was protecting her world from rogue electrons. I didn't respond. Silence is a power move that doesn't look like one. The second sign of trouble arrived at 6 a.m. when I opened my door to leave for work. My driveway was blocked by the Mercedes EQS, deliberately parked sideways like a barricade in a low-budget action film. The husband leaned against the hood sipping coffee, as if he had declared a personal checkpoint. When I asked him to move, he smiled like a man who's convinced the universe signed a deed in his favor. "We're using the charger this morning," he said, matter of fact. "You weren't responding to my text." I pointed to the gate at the side of the house. "It's locked because private property exists. Please move your car." He shrugged and looked out at the street, unconcerned. "We'll be quick. You can wait." It wasn't about time. It was about the presumption that he could decide the rules simply by existing loudly enough. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line because this wasn't a yelling situation. It was a paperwork situation. When the cruiser rolled up 10 minutes later, he seemed almost disappointed that the officer didn't applaud his theatric. When told to move his vehicle or be cited and possibly towed, he launched into a Shakespearean monologue about neighborhood unity and my anti-community selfishness. The officer stared at him, unimpressed. Once the EQS moved, the officer pulled me aside and quietly explained the procedure for restraining orders in property dispute. I promised I'd consider it. By midday, Karen had posted another furious forum rant, claiming I'd weaponized the police to deny life-saving access to green transportation. Several neighbors rolled their eyes in reply, but a few of her faithful liked the post, and likes in a feud are like pouring gasoline on ego. That evening I found a flyer shoved into my mailbox. Support community charging. Mandatory vote next month. Karen had drafted a rule change proposal that would designate visible chargers as shared HOA amenities. She thought she'd found a legal loophole big enough to drive her Mercedes through. Now the conflict had structure and a deadline. HOAs are small democracies fueled by pettiness. A single vote could change rules and future headache. So I campaigned. Calmly, quietly, with facts instead of flyers. I hosted a demonstration that showed how residential electricity billing works, how usage costs fall on the homeowner, how liability risk works. People listened. They asked questions. They shared their own Karen scars. And unexpectedly, they rallied. Not around me, but around the principle that property rights matter and bully tactics don't age well. Karen wasn't slowing down. She organized house visits paired with sugary smiles and passive-aggressive bribes like homemade brownies that tasted like control. She told parents that refusing community access would stunt children's futures. She claimed I was planning to charge outsiders under the table. She staged photo ops with her husband pretending to be tragically unplugged. Every move she made was designed to frame her as the champion of shared prosperity rather than the dictator of driveway entitlement. The night before the vote, doorbell cameras throughout Copper Oaks captured a coordinated sticker campaign. Neon arrows plastered to sidewalks and curbs pointing toward my charger with the words "Free Charge Zone." I spent the evening peeling them off, while Karen's shadow lurked nearby filming me like she'd caught a criminal destroying priceless public art. I didn't take the bait. I maintained the calm she hated so much because nothing infuriates a tyrant more than a neighbor who refuses to provide a spectacle. The vote night arrived with folding chairs and tepid lemonade in the clubhouse. Residents murmured anxiously. Aaron opened the meeting with the resignation of someone who wished for less drama and more retirement. Karen rose to speak first. Her presentation featured a slideshow of children next to EV charging stations, emotional appeals about community spirit, and a chart that made no mathematical sense. Her husband nodded so vigorously I worried he might pass out. Then Aaron gestured to me. I didn't use slides or theatrics. I used reality. The cost of electricity. The legal liability of unauthorized individuals on private property. The documented harassment and tampering. The sheriff incident. The county reports. And the part that landed hardest. If the charger becomes an HOA asset, the HOA becomes responsible for maintenance and safety costs, which means escalating dues for every resident. A quiet ripple moved through the room as people realized free things are never free. Ballots were cast. Volunteers counted while Karen paced like a general awaiting battle results. When the numbers were announced, the measure failed by a wide margin. Karen went red, then pale, then red again. She shouted that the count was rigged. She accused Aaron of betrayal. She accused me of manipulating the elderly. She accused everyone who voted no of destroying the future. A neighbor gently reminded her that democracy means accepting loss. She didn't appreciate the civics lesson. Storming from the clubhouse, she hissed at her husband and gestured back toward our street. He reluctantly followed. I lingered to help Aaron stack chairs, trying not to enjoy the victory too much. I returned home ready to finally close the chapter on this absurd saga. But victory has a price and people like Karen don't retreat, they regroup. My charger camera alerted me to motion. On the screen, Karen, hair a mess of rage, wielding a metal pole aimed at the charger like a medieval weapon. Her husband stood nearby, pleading with her to stop. She swung once. Sparks erupted. The light briefly illuminated her face twisted with panic. The breaker tripped, plunging the side yard into darkness. She staggered backward shrieking as if the machine had risen to punish her. Her husband grabbed her and dragged her toward their garage as she cursed both me and the atoms that comprised electricity. When I stepped outside minutes later, the air still smelled like burnt ambition. The charger casing was cracked, wires exposed like a wound. It was unmistakably destruction of private property. The county electrician confirmed the next day that the damage was intentional and severe. My car was now useless without charging and repairs wouldn't be cheap. I wasn't shaken. I was done. And when rational people are done, they seek bigger solutions. Aaron attended the emergency meeting with a folder thick enough to be a thesis. The sheriff arrived with statements and footage. The county inspector filed safety violations. A restraining order request sat on top of the stack like the grand finale. While the board deliberated sanctions, I was silent but strategic. I had already contacted a company with a new kind of charger and a new installation location. If Karen wanted a war over electricity, I would move the battlefield somewhere she couldn't reach. I planned a surprise upgrade that would make everything she had done not only pointless but counterproductive. Because she hadn't just crossed a line. She had electrified it. And now the consequences would travel in only one direction. Back to her. The emergency HOA meeting felt less like a neighborhood gathering and more like a courtroom drama with uncomfortable folding chairs. Aaron sat at the head of the long conference table, stacks of printed complaints and county reports spread before him like battle plans. Karen and her husband entered together, but their body language was wildly mismatched. He looked like a man attending his own parole hearing. She looked like a queen forced to breathe the same air as peasants. I kept my expression neutral because victory isn't a smirk. Victory is documentation. The sheriff's deputy quietly handed Aaron a packet of legal forms confirming the investigation into property damage and attempted utility fraud. Aaron adjusted his glasses and called the meeting to order. Karen immediately stood and pointed at me like she was conducting an invisible orchestra of blame. He sabotaged his own charger to frame us and gain sympathy, she declared. Several neighbors groaned. Aaron tapped the microphone, reminding everyone that accusations require evidence. Evidence is what I had. A USB drive slid across the table. The deputy plugged it into the projector. Silence fell as the footage played. Karen creeping into my yard with the metal pole, the swing, the sparks, her recoiling scream. It was irrefutable. Her husband squeezed his eyes shut, humiliation radiating off him like heat. The board issued their findings. Karen was guilty of harassment and property destruction. Her husband was guilty of participation in prior tampering. Sanctions were immediate. A $5,000 fine for damages. A cease contact order. Temporary suspension of HOA voting privileges. Mandatory approval for all of her future exterior changes. Karen clenched the edge of the table hard enough to leave nail dent. This is a farce, she spat. He lured us. He provoked us. He's waging psychological warfare. Someone in the back muttered that the only war being fought was in Karen's head. The deputy handed me a document. The restraining order had been approved. Karen was legally required to remain a specified distance from my property and from me. Her outrage reached operatic levels. She accused the board of corruption. She declared Aaron unfit to lead. She marched toward the door, heels stabbing the carpet like she was killing it 1 square inch at a time. "This isn't over," she shouted, for what seemed like the 50th time. The door slammed. But this time, the threat sounded less like a promise and more like a desperate refrain from someone losing her grip on a shrinking kingdom. As the room emptied, Aaron stayed behind. He rubbed his temples and muttered that this job used to just be about paint colors and noise complaint. When he asked if I planned to keep the charger in the same spot, I told him no. A new installation was already on the schedule. The electrician would relocate the charger inside my locked garage with a wall-mounted unit that required my car's proximity authentication to even unlock. Wireless, secure, untouchable. Aaron actually smiled for the first time in months. "Smart move," he said. "Let her fight shadows." While repairs and upgrades were underway, I rented a car so I could still commute. The garage felt strangely quiet without the Tesla connected, almost like the house was holding its breath. During that silence, I thought about the psychology behind power. Karen wasn't driven by need or fairness. She was driven by fear. fear that she wasn't in control, that someone nearby had something she couldn't dictate. Realizing that didn't make her less dangerous. It just made her unpredictable. The next wave didn't come from her. It came from the internet. A neighbor's teen had decided to post clips of the meeting and the footage of Karen's electrifying mishap to TikTok. The video exploded in popularity. Tens of thousands of comments mocked Charger Karen. Memes appeared overnight featuring her freeze-framed mid-scream with captions like, "When you discover electricity isn't community property." I hadn't filmed or posted anything, but I still felt responsible. A viral neighborhood war was the last thing I wanted. But virality doesn't need permission. Karen vanished from public view for 3 days. Garage closed. Curtains drawn. No screaming matches on her lawn. Which made everyone nervous. On the 4th night, I found a large cardboard box on my porch, duct-taped like it contained radioactive material. A sticky note read, "Consider this compensation." Inside, the cracked remains of my charger casing wrapped in bubble wrap. My stomach sank. It wasn't an apology. It was a message. A reminder that she knew exactly what she had broken. A claim of dominance disguised as restitution. I logged it, photographed it, notified the deputy. He told me to keep my doors locked and my cameras rolling. Smart advice. Because the real retaliation was still loading. 2 mornings later, I stepped outside and found a fresh sign staked at the edge of her lawn facing the street. Private land. No trespassing. The problem was that it extended onto the tiny strip of grass between our driveways, a slice of land that technically belonged to me. I checked the survey markers. She had moved the boundary line pole by maybe 8 inches. Not enough for the untrained eye. Enough to start a property war. I didn't pull the sign out. I didn't move the pole. I called the county land survey office. They scheduled an on-site evaluation. 2 days later, a surveyor confirmed the tampering, documented it, and referred the case to the property disputes mediator. That evening, as I returned home, Karen was outside, arms crossed. She waited until I was halfway up my driveway before speaking. "You can't win against me," she said quietly, not like her usual shrieking. Calm threats feel more real. I asked her what exactly she thought she was winning. She leaned in, eyes sharp as cut glass. "This neighborhood was perfect before you came. You poisoned it. You brought chaos. And I will restore balance." It sounded like she had cast herself as some suburban Thanos. Before I could reply, her husband stepped out of the garage. He looked pale, defeated. He glanced at me, then at her. "Enough," he said. "This isn't balance. This is obsession." She turned on him with a fury that almost made me step backward. "Don't you dare side with him. Not now. Not after everything I've done for us." He didn't argue. He simply walked back inside, leaving her alone with her wrath. Watching that fracture happen in real time felt deeply uncomfortable. I didn't gloat. I went inside. I locked the door. The next week was a blur of professional installers drilling in my garage as neighbors whispered updates about Karen's increasingly volatile behavior. She was convinced people were conspiring against her, leaking information, mocking her. And unfortunately, she wasn't wrong. The TikTok videos kept spreading. Charger Karen hashtags multiplied. People drove through our neighborhood just to see her house. She hid behind blinds like she was bracing for paparazzi. On installation day, the electrician finished the new charger, sealed all wiring, tested everything twice. My Tesla welcomed its new home charging port like a prodigal connection restored. I finally felt the relief of safety. But safety is just an illusion when someone determined to ruin you has run out of legal moves. The power to my entire house shut off at 11:43 p.m. Darkness. Silence. Then the sound of footsteps outside my garage. I checked the camera feed. Karen stood at my breaker panel with a flashlight, flipping switches relentlessly, screaming something I couldn't hear. The footage caught everything. This wasn't petty anymore. It was dangerous. And now, the law would treat it that way. She had electrified the line one too many times, and I was done standing still while she sparked the next disaster. The scream wasn't loud, but it had that unhinged sharpness that makes every instinct inside you stand upright and alert. I grabbed my phone with one hand and a flashlight with the other, though the garage camera feed gave me the real story. Karen stood barefoot in my driveway wearing pajama pants and what looked like a sequined sweater, furiously yanking open my electrical panel like she was mining for gold. The flashlight she clenched in her teeth wobbled as she cursed the switches she couldn't understand. Every few seconds she jabbed at the breakers, but the new upgraded locks, mandated by the electrician after the fire scare, held firm. She wasn't just trying to shut down my charger. She was trying to shut down my life. The fridge, the heat, the alarms, all of it. I didn't rush outside. I called the sheriff. Calm voice, clear details, trespassing, attempted tampering, possible intoxication. Dispatch recognized the address instantly. She was now a regular. The garage camera recorded every frantic motion, each kick she delivered to the locked panel door. The metal pole she once used to assault my charger now lay at her feet like a relic of past sins. My lights flickered back on as backup generators kicked in. Her outrage rose with the voltage. She screamed that I was controlling the electricity against her, that I had tricked the power company into conspiring with me. She was ranting like someone who believed the world had rewritten itself just to prove her wrong. At that moment, her husband stepped into frame. His shoulders drooped as if he carried the weight of 1,000 complaints. He tried to pull her away from the panel, whispering something I couldn't hear. She swatted his hand away and shoved him so hard he stumbled into my recycling bin. Cans clattered across the concrete like metallic applause. She spun on him, screaming about loyalty, about betrayal, about how she had sacrificed her sanity to protect their status in this once perfect neighborhood. That last phrase felt like a confession. She finally realized perfection had expired the moment she started policing it. The deputy arrived fast, lights flashing, siren off. He approached carefully and asked her to step back from the panel. Instead, she grabbed the handle and rattled it like a cage she expected would burst open if she shook hard enough. When the deputy placed a cautious hand on her arm, she whipped around and slapped him. A mistake so immediate and catastrophic even she froze afterward. The deputy grabbed her wrists and she fought like a wild thing, convinced cornering herself was still somehow someone else's fault. Backup arrived. She screamed legal jargon she didn't understand. The cuffs clicked shut. The chaos paused. The sheriff asked if I wanted to press charges. I didn't hesitate. Yes. Yes, I did. Her husband didn't plead. Didn't protest. He simply watched quietly as she was guided into the cruiser, her shouts echoing across the quiet suburban street like a cautionary tale. The neighborhood lights flickered alive. Curtains shifted. Phones recorded. Karen wasn't just a meme anymore. She was a criminal. The deputy filed the charges. Vandalism, trespassing, disorderly conduct, assault on an officer. Serious consequences. One's entitlement couldn't argue its way out of. When the police vehicle pulled away, her husband approached me, shoulders sagging. He stared at the ground for a long moment before whispering, "I didn't know how far she'd go." I replied with honesty. People like her never realize they're the villains of their own stories until they've already burned the plot down. He rubbed his forehead, the exhaustion of a man who'd spent years apologizing for someone who never felt wrong. He confessed their finances were strained. The fines, the property values, the attorney fees, the constant battles had drained them. And the social humiliation? Priceless. I suggested he seek legal protection if he needed it. He nodded, voice shaking, and said he wasn't sure what he was still trying to save. He disappeared into the darkened house next door like a ghost not ready to haunt anything anymore. I expected to sleep well that night. I didn't. Because silence after chaos feels like the universe holding its breath. The next morning, HOA gossip spread faster than electricity. Karen was not coming home. She'd been taken for psychiatric evaluation after a breakdown in the holding cell. Her husband filed for a temporary separation the next day. The neighbors who once tolerated her now openly vented. One woman admitted Karen had harassed her for using a garden hose during the wrong hours. Another revealed fines Karen issued for a slightly cracked lawn gnome. She had ruled the community by fear disguised as protocol. And once fear evaporated, all that was left was memory and resentment. Aaron called to update me. The board voted unanimously to issue a permanent ban. Karen was removed from her compliance chair position, stripped of authority, and forbidden from approaching any HOA administrative property or communication channels. The Queen of Copper Oaks had lost her crown. But strangely, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. People think revenge is fireworks and victory speeches. In reality, it's paperwork and exhaustion and cleaning up broken things. I took a day off work just to reset my brain. I walked the neighborhood. The streets were quiet. Normal. The kind of normal Karen had always claimed she was defending while she destroyed it. Then news broke online. Not rumors. Not memes. A local reporter picked up the police arrest footage. The clip of Karen screaming about community assets ran on the nightly broadcast. Her meltdown trended again. This time with headlines like HOA Chaos, Woman Arrested for Attempting to Steal Electricity from Neighbor. Her husband disabled comments on every profile they owned. He stayed inside. And even though I didn't post anything, even though I tried to remain invisible in the digital storm, my house number appeared in comments. Strangers debated my life like a spectator sport. That night, I found a letter taped to my door. The handwriting was messy, frantic. It said, "You destroyed my life. You will pay when I come home." The police collected the note. They informed the judge. The restraining order expanded. Additional patrols were assigned near my driveway. That should have made me feel safer. It didn't. Because threats aren't scary when they're shouted. They're terrifying when they're whispered. But here's the twist no one saw coming, not even me. The very next morning, a man in a suit knocked on my door. He introduced himself as a representative for a clean energy tech company. They had seen the viral videos. They loved the attention the charger dispute had generated. They wanted to sponsor a new high-end smart charger installation at my home, for free in exchange for a small promotional story about responsible EV ownership. They wanted to make me the poster child for the future of suburban charging. Karen's war had accidentally given me an upgrade her wildest power trips never could. I accepted. And the moment I signed the paperwork, a realization hit me. The worst thing you can do to someone obsessed with control is show them they've only strengthened what they tried to destroy. Karen took swings at my charger thinking she was attacking me. But she never understood. Electricity always finds a path forward. And so would I. The power had shifted. Completely. And when Karen came home from psychiatric eval, she would step into a neighborhood that no longer feared her, a house no longer captive to her theatrics, and a me no longer willing to play defense. She wanted a war? Fine. But now, she would have to fight the consequences she wired for herself. Because the biggest shock was still to come. Karen returned 3 weeks later. Not in handcuffs, not escorted. Just quietly dropped off by her husband in a car that no longer looked like a status symbol. Dark circles ringed her eyes. Her hair was flat, her posture uncharacteristically small. But if I'd learned anything, it's that a quiet Karen is never a defeated Karen. The stillness usually comes right before the storm. I found out from Aaron that she'd been released under mandatory mental health supervision, forbidden from approaching my home or mailbox. Her husband had filed for legal separation and had quietly moved into a rental across town. Their house, once a fortress of rules and judgment, now sat in legal limbo with a "for sale" sign leaning crookedly in the front yard. Copper Oaks looked like it had expelled a parasite. But parasites adapt. And she had one last move left. The first sign was subtle, a scratched message in the dust of my car window. Traitor. I brought it to the sheriff. He logged it, warned me she'd be desperate. Then came the drone. A tiny buzzing device hovering near my driveway one evening while I grilled dinner. I recorded it, reported it. The deputy sighed heavily. Another file, another violation, another reminder that obsession doesn't obey court orders. You'd think constant harassment would make me furious, but I was tired. Tired enough that when the clean energy company scheduled the installation of my upgraded charger system, I nearly cried with relief. This wasn't just an improvement. It was closure wrapped in technology. The new charger was mounted inside my sealed garage with smart locking, biometric authentication, and a direct meter feed. The technicians installed solar-ready expansion ports and a motion tracking system that would alert me if anything even breathed near the panel. It was sleek, clean, invulnerable. A product designed to withstand people like her. The local newspaper stopped by for a small photo and blurb. Just a man upgrading his EV charger with corporate sponsorship. A harmless human interest story. But Karen didn't see harmless. She never had. She only saw me winning what she believed she had lost. Late that night, my motion camera pinged. I opened the live feed. Karen lurked at the property line, just inside the restraining order radius, pacing like a caged animal measuring distance. She stared at my house, muttering to herself. The look in her eyes wasn't anger. It was confusion mixed with betrayal, like she genuinely couldn't understand how the world had stopped bending for her. I didn't confront her. Didn't step outside. I just let the cameras do the watching. Let the evidence gather itself. The next morning, she escalated. She marched to the HOA clubhouse and demanded to file a complaint against the entire board for systemic discrimination. Aaron called me almost immediately after, apologizing even though he had nothing to apologize for. She threatened lawsuits. She blamed the neighborhood for ruining her public image. She insisted she'd been the victim all along. Aaron politely suggested she step away and focus on healing. That word, healing, set her off like a lit fuse thrown into gasoline. She saw me walking my dog that afternoon. The air thickened. Her face twisted into a snarl. She stormed toward me until she reached the invisible restraining line painted in her head. She stood there, chest heaving, sputtering words torn from a tangle of rage and disbelief. You destroyed my life. You made them hate me. You stole everything. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't take a step closer. I simply said the truth. I didn't destroy your life. You electrified your own downfall. She screamed so loudly a flock of birds took flight from a nearby tree. The deputy sitting down the street rolled forward. She stopped, retreating just enough to avoid arrest. That moment wasn't satisfying. It was sad. Because I realized she would never believe she was the cause of her own misery. By the end of the week, her house officially went on the market. The listing price dropped twice. Neighbors whispered theories about what she'd do next. The answer came sooner than expected. Around 2 a.m., the cameras jolted awake. The alert wasn't motion. It was tampering. Multiple panels. Multiple tools. I opened the live feed and saw 3 figures near the side of my house. Karen, her husband, and one of the teens who had filmed everything months earlier. She was back with backup. The husband looked uneasy, glancing around like a man regretting life choices in real time. Karen pointed at my garage wall like a general ordering a siege. She was going for the new setup, the one thing she believed could restore her power. The teen held a crowbar. The husband held a flashlight with shaking hands. Karen gripped the same metal pole that had once sparked her downfall. Before I could call the sheriff, alarms shrieked. The garage lights flashed. The deterrent system activated, broadcasting a loud warning. Unauthorized access detected. Law enforcement notified. But Karen pushed forward. She wasn't listening to warnings anymore. The teen swung once. The crowbar connected with a junction box. A brilliant blue arc erupted. The scream that followed was primal, electricity reminding flesh who owned the night. The teen fell back, clutching his hand, crying out for his mother. The husband froze, eyes wide, his loyalty finally outmatched by fear. Karen lunged again at the box, ignoring both pain and reason. Sparks shot toward her like angry stars, and she stumbled, falling into a decorative bush that caught fire from the stray arc. The teen scrambled away. The husband grabbed her arm, but she fought him, still shrieking about fairness, community, ownership. By then, the sheriff's vehicles were already speeding toward the house, sirens on this time. Deputies poured in, extinguishing flames, separating the trio. Karen screamed that we had set traps for her, that the electricity was attacking her, that I controlled it like some suburban sorcerer. Her husband, shaking violently, told the deputies the truth. She made us do this. She planned everything. The deputies documented injuries and damages. They read her the charges: violations of restraining order, criminal trespass, reckless endangerment, property damage, contributing to minor delinquency. She kicked at the ground as they restrained her, rage echoing in words stripped of logic. I'm restoring the balance. He's stealing the future. Everyone is against me. They don't care. The neighborhood watched from windows as she was arrested again, but this time no one filmed. There was no joy in it, just relief. The teen was taken to the hospital with minor burns. His parents pressed charges. The husband gave a full statement and filed for a protective order of his own. Finally, the next day, a silence settled over Copper Oaks that felt like a house taking its first breath after surviving a fire. Aaron stopped by with paperwork clearing me of any liability due to tamper-resistant electrical safety standard. The board sent a handwritten note thanking me for my patience and reminding me that sometimes the community takes longer to see truth than we'd like. My upgraded charger powered my car quietly, like peace humming through wires. A sold sign appeared in front of Karen's former house 2 weeks later. Movers came and went. The blinds never opened. One morning the house was empty, just a quiet box waiting for new stories that didn't involve screaming and burnt shrubbery. Life returned to normal. Actual normal. Not the brittle perfection Karen demanded, but the comfortable imperfection of neighbors who occasionally overwater lawns and forget trash day without fearing fines. Months passed. The viral videos turned into digital fossils buried beneath new trends. Sometimes I still catch a meme online, her face mid-spark, captioned with a joke about charging entitlement. And every time I feel not pleasure, not victory, just closure. I never spoke to Karen again. Last I heard, she moved in with family across the state where there are no HOAs to conquer. Her husband finalized the divorce and bought himself a modest condo with a public charging station out front. As for me, my charger works perfectly. My house is calm. My neighborhood is livable again. And if you ever want to understand the true human cost of entitlement, I'll tell you this. Electricity isn't dangerous. People who think they own it are.